Thank you everybody for being here, and thank you our panelists for taking a time out of your schedule to talk to our students. So ICMA is a widely recognized leading association of professional city and county managers who serve in local government. The Maxwell Student Chapter provides professional development, networking, and job opportunities for students who are interested in city and county management. Taking advantage of resources in the Maxwell City ICMA Student Chapter can provide opportunities for your future professional career. And so we have a lot of upcoming events, and if you would like to be involved, feel free to fill up our membership forms and we can get in touch with more events in the future. And with that, I would like to have Arpan, our Vice President, to moderate the panel and get things started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yen. Okay. We have 5 wonderful people here today. We'd like to thank them for coming. And how this is going to work is we already have set up questions, which we'll go through. And then after that, we'll open the floor to the audience for more questions. And let's start with our icebreaker question. And I'd also request the panelists to introduce themselves while answering this. How did you get to the point where you are professionally today? Did you have a plan coming out of graduate school? And if so, how closely did you follow it? I guess Wally can go first, and then we can move to the right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Wally Bobkowitz, MPA, class of 1989. The city manager in Evanston, Illinois. I'm one of those really strange ones. I had a plan and stuck to it, and 20 odd years, almost 27 years later, still on it. So I am the anomaly. I am the museum piece. It is not the way it works normally. So please don't think you have to work that way. But after my time here at the Maxwell School, I participated in a management fellow program that the city of Long Beach, California has. I was there for 8 years, and then from there became an assistant city manager in a community in Northern California. And then for the last 15 years, I've been a city manager, part of that time in Southern California, and then for the last 8 years as the city manager in Evanston, Illinois. So I'm fortunate that it's all worked out, but again, I am the exception to the rule. There's no one in this room who should think that sitting here today, you know what that plan is. I think the best that you can hope for is to leave Maxwell having a general sense of the kind of things you want to do and go from there.
Yeah, I am not an exception, I guess. My name's Alicia Madden. I got my MPA in 2010 from here, and it was during a recession, and I just kind of reached out to Maxwell grads. I knew I wanted to go to Albany, the state capital, so I reached out to Maxwell grads that were there and was offered a financial position with the Senate Finance Committee. And wasn't really what I had looked at here. Didn't really have a plan though, so I just went for it. And now my entire career has been in state and then local finance. And it's actually really interesting, and I would encourage everyone to look into it a little more while you're here, because I never did, and I wish I had. So I went from Senate Finance Committee to Assembly Ways and Means, and then onto the governor's staff as a federal liaison for Hurricane Sandy relief efforts, and then into the Division of Budget, and then moved back to Syracuse about 2 years ago and have been working in the budget department there as the senior budget analyst.
Hi, my name is Adria Finch. I'm the Director of Innovation with the City of Syracuse. I definitely did not have a plan that I followed. I do not have an MPA. I did not go to Maxwell. I did not go to SU. So I hope that you guys will still listen to me, even when I talk. So I went to undergrad and studied physiology. After I finished undergrad, I lived in Montreal. Actually, I did hockey equipment research. So nothing related to government at all. I designed hockey skates, and then went on to get my master's degree in biomechanics. So I wanted to have a very science focus, research focus, and ended up working with the U.S. biathlon team with so skiing and shooting, doing their sports science research. But while I was doing that, I actually, for some extra income, started doing marketing efforts with the Olympic Regional Development Authority. And I was like, wow, this business thing is kind of cool, but I really like the science background that I have, and I want to maybe combine business with science. So I went and got an MBA and focused kind of on technology along with that at Rensselaer Polytechnic. And so when I was at that school, I had a professor of practice who was involved with the local IDA. And so I started interning with him and doing projects with the Rensselaer County Industrial Development Association. And once I completed my MBA, I was like, wow, this economic development, I never thought I would want to get into this. It really interested me. And so I took a job doing economic development here in Syracuse. And then to get into actual government, there was a board member of our organization who worked for the city. He was at the time, the director of planning, city-county planning, Andrew Maxwell. And he was going to front this new Office of Innovation that was starting up. And so I met with him to kind of learn about it. And I thought, this is cool. It's actually applying a lot of my science background to government operations. So it's combining these really cool things that I love, like actually trying to improve the place that you live in, but also this analytical component. And so I decided to apply for the innovation team to be part of it. And Andrew has since left the city. He made a bid for mayor yesterday. Well, not yesterday, but this year. He was not successful, so I stepped up into his director role. So that's a long way of saying, like, I did not have a plan. I never thought I was going to be in government, but now that I'm here, I love it. I love being able to impact the citizens in the community that I live in, and it's really refreshing and fun and exciting every day. So just be open to evolution of your plan if you do have one.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Cupid. I'm the city manager, township administrator for the township of Greenbrook. It's in New Jersey. It's a small 4-square-mile town. The more I listened to them talk, I thought about the fact that I think it probably sounds like I had a plan, but I don't think I did. I came to Maxwell to get my MPA mostly to avoid becoming an adult. So I came here straight out of undergraduate. And I just want to say that I wish that I could do it over again now, because I think I would have a completely different experience and get completely different takeaways than I did back then. I think I probably wanted to go into government. I was a poli-sci minor in undergrad. I was in student government, all the sort of telltale, you're going to go into government things. I had a state internship at the state of New Jersey. I didn't love it. I did not feel like I had an opportunity to make an impact at the state level in New Jersey. So when a local government opportunity presented itself in New Jersey, a couple towns over from where my folks lived, I thought, I would apply. I had already applied for a couple of other jobs at the state level because I already had some inroads there. But when this local thing came up, I thought it might be kind of interesting. And the finance officer and the municipal clerk of this little town where I started took a chance on a 22-year-old with an MPA from Maxwell. And I think the MPA from Maxwell probably helped me get in the door. And then I was there for 2 years. I think coming out of Maxwell and going into a local government job, I was not sure really where I wanted to go with it or what the track was. I ended up following a pretty traditional track. I started sort of mid-level. I ended up becoming an assistant administrator in another larger town, and I was there for quite a long time, 7 or 8 years, and then went off on my own and became an administrator. So I think I kind of did follow a more traditional track, but I agree with what she said about, being open to sort of what the universe is throwing at you and see how it fits into, your future plans.
Hi, that was great. And thank you everyone for being here. My name is Nate Stevens, and I'm a class of 2010 Maxwell alum. I also came right from undergrad to Maxwell. I was a Geneseo economics major in 2009, so I literally graduated at the worst possible time in the past 50 years probably. But I came here, and it's been a great decision. After Maxwell, I started working the Monday after graduation in the budget office for Onondaga County, and was there for a while, and then for 5 years, I was the administrative director at the Parks Department, which was a lot of fun, exactly like the show, and but it was great because you really got to kind of see all the behind-the-scenes stuff that happens in government that no one really thinks about, like the purchasing policies and budgeting and accounting and all the personnel stuff and contracts. So it was great to do that. And then for the past year and a half, I've actually been working in economic development in Onondaga County, and I'm an economic development specialist currently for the Onondaga County Office of Economic Development, where one of the things that we do is I'm the treasurer for the Onondaga County IDA. So it's very exciting, as Adria alluded to earlier, and it's a great experience.
Wonderful. Moving on to the next question. What skills and/or courses did you find most useful during your graduate school? In hindsight, what courses or skills do you wish to have gained that would be useful to your career?
Yeah, as I said, I wish I had taken more public finance type classes. I knew I wanted to do more policy stuff, and so Professor Vince was my biggest driver here. And I'm really happy that I took those policy courses. I think that's important, but I think it was kind of nearsighted in that you really, the best advice I've gotten from a fellow Maxwell grad was the person who hired me for my first job out of Maxwell said, before you do anything policy, you have to understand how the budget works. And I said, oh, I hadn't really thought of that before. And it's totally true. I mean, and you see it in a lot of elected officials even, if you don't understand how the budget works, you're not going to get very far. And so I encourage people. I know that the daycare budget is killer, but it's probably one of the most useful things that I did while I was here at Maxwell. So public finance absolutely is my missed moment.
I would just like to chime in and add that, all the quant stuff that you do is really, really useful, mainly because a lot of people are scared of it when you get out in the working world. And so the quantitative stuff is your best way to get your foot in the door. It's not a coincidence that both Alicia and I graduated in 2010, and our first jobs were in budget offices, when during a year it was very hard to find a job. So even though you may think, oh, this class is more interesting, knowing the budget, knowing all the quantitative stuff, essentially whatever other people don't like to do is exactly where you should be going. And especially now, what's really cool now, it's coming into focus is all the coding stuff and how that can cross over into government. And if I was a Maxwell student today, that'd be the thing that I'd be really, really intrigued by.
I would build off upon that and just say that's something that has been the most valuable skill in our office. And again, I don't know what courses you guys all take, but the two things that would be most valuable if I could go back and do it again, it's data visualizations and understanding how to present data in a meaningful way and how to actually manage it. Because especially there's, a big trend in performance offices coming up in government now and just trying to be more efficient and effective and elicit cost savings. So if you can figure out how to communicate that and get people to do it, whether it's, showing them numbers or showing them charts, being able to run or build a program that can compute things on a regular basis and update how performance is, that's really important. The other class that I wish I would have taken is, and I don't know, again, if there's something for it, negotiating. I feel like whether I'm negotiating with a crew at DPW to get them to fill potholes a certain way, or if I'm negotiating a much bigger, not that I'm doing this, but somebody's negotiating an economic development deal, being able to talk to people and come to a table and come to agreement is a really important skill. And one of the classes that I took that has been most meaningful, I think, is has been project management and just understanding how to take an idea and develop it and bring it to fruition is a really important skill in government. One of the things that I hear constantly that drives me crazy is I'll ask people, well, why do we do it this way? And I always get the answer, well, we've always done it that way. That is not an acceptable answer. Never tell anybody that. So you need to be able to think creatively and problem solve and develop a solution all the way.
So I'm going to dive right in. Probably the best class I took, well, at least the one that I can remember since, it's been a while. I loved my conflict resolution class while I was here. That one really sticks with me, and I think that really helps me in my role as the administrator with negotiating contracts with, unions, with negotiating with employees to get them to do what you need them to do, really just being able to talk to people and get them to understand, what your needs are, and for you to be able to really understand what their needs are and try to find common ground. Generally speaking, I think my experience here at Maxwell was super helpful in entering the workforce because of the focus on writing memos and not papers, the focus on group work, which is really annoying, but that's what the real world is all about, is working with people and working in groups. And also the practical work with outside agencies I found to be very helpful here. My group, my year, we did a project with the Arc of Onondaga, and we evaluated their employee performance evaluation tools, and they had 6 different locations and 6 different tools, but they were one organization. So, when you're a student, especially for myself coming straight out of undergrad, I didn't have any real practical work experience. So being able to enter into an organization and sort of assess what's going on there and try to come up with something, all the while you're working with your colleagues, managing that whole process, you get some project management experience in there as well. So all of those things I think are extremely beneficial. And those are the types of things that as students you should be sort of just be a sponge, absorb as much as possible with those types of things.
All right, moving on. Do or did you have a professional mentor? If yes, what attributes do you look for in finding one? How do you develop these relationships?
Sure. I had, while I was in school, I had a professor who was a professor of practice that mentored me, and I relied on him more heavily because he was actually out doing work, and he was working in economic development. That was the area that I wanted to go into, and so he kind of gave us the real world take on things rather than kind of, some of the hypothetical, sugar-coated things that sometimes you read about in textbooks. And so if you can, while you're here, if you can interact or find somebody to mentor you who is actually doing work in the community, I think that's really important. And then professionally, I think I didn't find somebody right away. I went out to the community and started to build relationships with people and have meetings with people, and then started to connect and see how other people are connected in the community. I think that's one of the most important things is you want to find somebody who is well networked and can introduce you to others so that you can expand your own personal network and your experiences as well. So I guess I don't really have any major groundbreaking takeaways other than try to find somebody.
Pretty good.
Try to find somebody in the community who's doing the work and who has a big professional network that you can rely upon.
I think mentors are different mentors for different stages of where you're at. I would encourage you to find some folks that will help you transition from graduate school to a job. And that person may not be the person that's your mentor forever, but to have someone to help with that right now. Once you get in the job, I think what you said is true. You kind of have to survey the scene of where you're at. Mentors come in all shapes and sizes. They could be supervisors, they could be community members, they could be coworkers. You just really don't know. But I think right now, you really should think about who is helping you plan that transition from graduate school to the workplace, and that's probably the most important mentor for you now. but people change over time. I've had a gentleman who was a former city manager, just retired from being city manager in Sacramento, California. Just thinking about him helps sometimes, because it's the what would John do kind of thing. And so we don't spend as much time in contact anymore, but we've been associated with one another for such a long time. Just knowing that he's there, knowing that how he would handle situations, and just even running through that in your mind can be helpful sometimes.
Yeah, and I just agree most of all with finding someone who has the network that is helpful for you to tap into, because that's a big deal when you're looking for jobs, or even when you're not, for them to even, if you're perfectly happy in your job, there could be one that's even better that you don't know about, and they do. And they know that you fit that job, and they know how to get you into it, and networking is just so important. So yeah, that's really important too in the mentor.
So I wrote about a whole page about how important having a mentor is. So I'm just going to read you a couple of things. I had the best mentor I could have ever asked for in my second job as the assistant administrator. He was a seasoned administrator. And I think my advice to you as students would be to seek them out. They don't fall in your lap 9 times out of 10. And sometimes that requires you to get out of your comfort zone. If you're interested in local government, go to a local government here in this area. It doesn't have to be the city of Syracuse. And meet with the manager. Meet with a department head and say, I'm really interested. Could I shadow you for a day or something like that? And these are the situations that you're in that you're like, oh, is this person going to think I'm annoying, or am I bothering them, or whatever? But that's what you need to do to figure out if this is the area that you want to go into. A good mentor will be patient. They'll want you to succeed. They are going to let you fail. They're going to let you face some challenges on your own, but they'll always be there for you when you just need that nudge in the right direction. But my biggest advice really is just to watch and listen. I spent 8 years shadowing him, basically. In every meeting, I would go back after meetings and say, so why did you say X, Y, and Z? And he would explain. And this guy was a master chess player. I always said, I'll never be able to think like he does. I don't know how he comes up with these things. So he retired last July. And my assistant, when I was there, so I was the assistant administrator, he filled in for me when I was out on maternity leave, and then when I left to become administrator, he became the assistant administrator. He is now the administrator there, and he and I looked at each other when our mentor retired and said, oh my gosh, we're the ones now. This is so strange. So I also, just on the note of being a mentor or having a mentor, I find it very important to try to mentor other people and sort of return the favor. So I always have an intern. I have a staff of 6 people in town hall. I have a total staff of 56 people. But I always have an intern every summer. Usually they're from Rutgers because that's right there. But I try to, do the same thing. I bring them into meetings that I don't need help. I don't need input necessarily from the intern, but I think it's important for them to see things in action, because that's, again, how you figure out what you want to be when you grow up. So that's all. That's my whole page.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, so. That's good.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next one. It is important to know your community's history and priorities. For those moving to a new place, how do you become familiar with the community you are serving? And for those who this applies.
Don't worry about it. I mean, I think at this juncture, while it's important over time to learn, I would say that at this point, you pick where you're going based on very selfish things. what part of the country do you want to be? Do you have a significant other who has a job in another part of the country that you need to move to? I think those are hard enough issues to get your head around at this point. I think over time, it's great to be in communities that you feel good about, and I think that you'll learn what those factors and attributes are. But certainly at this point, if you like warm weather, move someplace warm. If you like cold weather, move someplace cold. If you have a significant other who's got a job in Florida, move to Florida. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and I think once you get there, just kind of immerse yourself in where you are. Just listen, listen to people, and they know better probably since you've just moved there what the history of the location is, what the culture is there, and I think listening is an important thing to do in any circumstance, but mostly when you're moving to a new place, it's better to listen to the people that already live there than try to tell them what you want it to be.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. And maybe it's not a huge disagreement. I've interviewed some folks for jobs with the city of Syracuse who weren't familiar with many of the challenges that exist in our community, and they went into the no pile. If they weren't able to, if we asked, well, what do you think we should focus on? What should our office, what should some of our priorities be? They weren't able to speak about some of the challenges that our community was facing in an educated level. It turned us off. So, that's, I think, a general rule of thumb. If you're interviewing for anything, be aware of the subject matter. It doesn't need to dictate necessarily where you go, but when you're actually looking for a position, I think you need to be aware of what's going on in the community just to help you land the job.
I agree with all that was said so far, so I'm going to save our time for everything else.
All right. Okay, moving on to the next one. What does a typical day look like in your job, and what are the challenges you face or you have faced in your work?
I think we should hear about the Onondaga Budget Office first.
Yeah, let's start with that.
All right. So kind of right now as an economic development specialist, I actually love what I do on a day-to-day basis. It's fantastic. We go and we meet with companies, and it's really cool because with economic development, you're always talking about projects, and you get to really kind of watch and help businesses expand and grow, which is just an incredible thing to do. And it's cool too because you get to think structurally a lot more than in some other roles, in that you're always thinking like, okay, well, if we have our policy about tax exemptions this way, what's it going to do, and what kind of companies are we going to get, and what are our tools going to be? And then also kind of being aware of everyone around you and just kind of figuring out how to add value the most. So a day in my job is pretty much we just go out and meet with companies, and then we have board meetings on a monthly cycle, and it kind of repeats. It's nice that we aren't really tied too much to the annual county budget process because our office is funded through a different way. So we're not really on the yearly cycle that some other people are.
So my job changes depending upon what time of year it is. So in the Office of Innovation, we follow this 4-step process, which seems pretty logical. The first step is once a challenge is identified, you research that challenge. You try to understand both from a qualitative and quantitative aspect what's happening in your community. You also research best practices and how the challenge presents itself in other communities. So it's this really thorough investigative process. Then step 2 is a little bit more, it's a lot more creative. It's how do you generate ideas to solve a problem? And so we do different exercises in engaging staff, engaging the community to generate ideas. And typically we end up with a few hundred ideas that we then have to sort through and figure out which ones we want to implement. And then step 3 is very project management oriented. So it's, okay, you have this idea, you want to turn into initiative. How do you actually bring it to fruition? And then step 4 is analyzing it and adapting it if necessary. And so some parts of the year we're very focused in doing research. Other times you're creative, and then other times you're, management oriented. So kind of my job description changes. That being said, on a day-to-day basis, typically I would say I would have, 3 is probably a good average number, three meetings a day. Depending upon what part of the process we're at, they'll be geared towards different things. And then we actually work as a team a lot too to move things forward. So we will brainstorm and powwow together to advance different ideas. As a group, we have a very open office concept where nobody can ever really escape. So we have this interesting office dynamic. And then, I would say then a good portion of the day is you have to be able to respond to whatever comes your way. So when the mayor says, hey, I need you to put a presentation together, you stop everything that you're doing for, however long it takes you to get this presentation done. So you need to be able to adapt and be agile as well.
Yeah, my day-to-day changes a lot. My position is a fintech type position, both financial and technical. So and of course I'm in the budget office, but report to both the budget office and the IT department. So it's some days I spend the entire day analyzing how the city can save money or make money or buy 3 new fire trucks. And some days I spend the entire day writing code and trying to move data around into a way that we can present to the public and things like that. Which I think is important in a job, is you don't ever want every day to look the same. So it certainly keeps you challenged.
You want to go, Kelly? Because
Yeah.
we
So
do similar things.
we do, and I think Wally's city is a lot bigger than mine. My job requires me to roll up my sleeves almost every single day to get put out whatever fire is happening that day. I can just give you an example. I mean, yesterday, so being the city manager does not always mean that you're involved in the elections. I'm also the municipal clerk, which means I'm the chief election officer. So I was up at 5 a.m. yesterday opening the polling places, making sure all my poll workers were where they were supposed to be, putting out fires. We had a machine that was having electrical problems. I had a voter whose husband was in the hospital, and she wanted him to vote. And so, that was my yesterday. But the day before it was something else. So there's always something, and that's what I love about what I do, because I do feel on a daily basis that I'm helping people, that I'm actually making a difference, that I'm having an impact on the community. Do you live in Evanston? So I live in my community. That's not a requirement to live in the town where you work. Some places it is a requirement, sort of like by ordinance, but it's not in my community. But I worked in Greenbrook for 5 years before I moved in. So I sort of did things backwards. But once I moved in, it definitely helped, I think, both from a personal life-work balance thing, and hurt a little bit because I'm always working because I live there. But it is definitely something different every day.
And I'll just echo what Kelly said. There is something different every day. It's not really a job. I mean, it's something you do 24/7. And there are some folks who work in cities and counties who don't like that part at all. And so I guess I'll just say, don't be discouraged. If your idea of a job is not devoting, 24/7, being stopped in grocery stores and, out on your walk on Sunday mornings. I have a 2-year-old son. We regularly get stopped at, 7 a.m. on Sunday with people who want to talk municipal business. I've been stopped in the gym coming out of a shower with a guy who wanted to complain about a zoning issue. So if that's not for you, that's okay. There are other...
Way to sell it, Wally. It's a way to sell it.
But because there are a lot of people, they think the local government, all jobs are like that, and it's not. And there's a lot of people who are saying, I'll do something else with my life because I don't want that kind of scrutiny. I want there to be a work-life balance. There are many, many opportunities working in local government where you can have that work-life balance. Are there some that are better than others? Yes. But there are lots of opportunities for work like that.
And the other thing I just wanted to mention really quickly is that a couple of the panelists have talked about the process. I love that. I wish I had the time to indulge in a process of, discovering the problems and research and data analysis. But a lot of times, especially in the smaller communities, it's really just, you're just on the hamster wheel a little bit. In the lulls, you do have some time to be a little bit more strategic. And that's kind of what we live for. We live for those moments when we can sit back and we can kind of big picture things. But I think the beauty of the panel is that we do have a couple of different positions represented to sort of show you there are so many different opportunities within local government, and not everybody's going to be a city manager. And but all of the pieces to the puzzle are really important to making communities better.
All right. Moving on, slightly different question. We have a large number of international students here in Maxwell. For all the international relations students here, do you have any IR experience, and what career path or advice would you recommend?
So I don't actually have any IR experience, but my college roommate from Geneseo works in the State Department, and he's one of the assistant directors in the Office of Foreign Trafficking. And it's funny because, all through Geneseo, he was always kind of avoiding math and all that kind of stuff, and he was an econ minor. But now he's had to do a lot more statistical stuff in his reports and everything. And he was kind of shocked by how much, even knowing what a basic, T-score distribution and all that kind of stuff means. And it just helps so much, and you get such an edge by being that person that has that skill set, no matter what field you are, and especially in IR. And that's just the one kind of piece of first-hand advice I have for IR people is, go for the coding or the stats or the economics or the whatever way that you can kind of see people who are kind of younger in that field advancing successfully, look at their background, and I bet you'll find that a lot of times. And that's a really good clue.
I also think there's a great Maxwell network of other IR students that have left here. I can think of a couple off the top of my head from my class who I see frequently posting on Facebook their travels and all the different things that they're doing. So I would just encourage you all to use the offices available here to connect with those people, because I'm certain that they would be willing to share their experiences with you and sort of tell you what different routes are that you can go.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Okay, for those who have changed your job, how do you know, or what made you feel it's time for your job or career change?
This is really easy for me. I've changed my job a lot. And it was always just, I kind of reached the point where I wasn't challenged anymore. And every time I've reached that point, I've had the conversation with my boss at the time and said, I feel like I've done my job here, and now it's, do you agree? Do you think there's something we can do here to challenge me further? Is there another big issue I can tackle? And they've, luckily in my experience, have always been very encouraging and have said, please move on. One of the other pieces of advice I had from one of my bosses is you can move, this is gonna be an odd analogy. If you just have a single pole and you're moving up it, it takes longer than if you're using two and jumping between them. I don't know if that even makes sense, but it does to me. And I think that's the kind of conversation I've had with my bosses before. Like, I don't want to just hang out and wait for you to retire, or, I want to keep moving. And a lot of times it's that you have to, maybe you leave an organization and go to a higher position at another organization, knowing that you're going to come back to the original one with that additional experience in a higher position. So for me, it's all about being challenged and knowing that you never want to stop pushing yourself to do something greater.
For me, one of the biggest things is just making sure that you're still passionate about your work. If you wake up and you're not excited to go to work anymore, I mean, everybody has some days where you're like, oh, I really don't want to have this meeting with so-and-so. That's not what I'm talking about. But when you wake up and after, a few days or, a few weeks or months, you're like, I just don't feel it anymore. I don't have that drive, or you're just doing the bare minimum to get by. Like, it's time to find something that makes you excited to wake up in the morning and go to work. Like, this is how you're spending the majority of your life. You want to make sure that you are doing something that you're happy and excited about. So that's, for me, has been, I haven't changed jobs a ton, but when I have, it's been because it was just a feeling a feeling of passion or lack thereof.
And the only counterpoint to that is that you have to make sure that you don't have a case of the grass is greener type of situation either. Sometimes your job can be boring. I think that's sort of, just a fact of life. And in those boring times, I think you can also strive to make it interesting or find new ways or innovate. I think that's kind of what I was saying. Like, my downtime is really when I can think the best and have the time to try to be innovative. But we had a recent situation in New Jersey, very well-known manager. He was in a town for a long time as the administrator, and he was bored. He had things running like clockwork. And there was a town that had a lot of political unrest and a lot of different things going on. They were looking for a new manager, and he thought, I'm gonna give it a try. It'll change things up. And he took a what we call now a 1-week vacation to the new town, which is very unusual for administrators. Our ICMA tenant says, we should give a 2-year commitment and this sort of thing. And this was just a unique situation, but he went, and it really was not what they purported it to be when he went through the interview process and things. And so he went back. He went back to his previous job, and he was fortunate that he was able to do that. But so that's just a cautionary tale once you're in the workforce, to just make sure you're not, constantly moving around, because sometimes what's right in front of you is good.
Nate, would you like to go?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I fired a police chief, and then he ran for council and won. So at that point, I knew perhaps it was time to look for another job.
Okay, moving on.
Try to add some levity to this very serious affair.
What is the proudest accomplishment of your career so far?
I fired a police chief and didn't lose my job. My proudest accomplishment is in Santa Paula, California, where I was city manager for 7 years. A local hospital closed, and the community desperately needed the hospital. It was far away. My city council said, we've got to figure out a way to reopen that hospital. The city was able to negotiate with the county, which provides health services. The property had some additional acreage, which was sold off. The city rezoned the property for housing. That money allowed the hospital to come out of bankruptcy, was purchased by the county, and now serves the residents. So knowing that people in that community have someplace to go for emergencies, for other healthcare issues, it was huge.
Any more accomplishment or any more firings?
I think one of my greatest accomplishments was when Hurricane Sandy hit. I felt that my team really ensured that we did an in-depth analysis and got the most funding we possibly could through the federal government and FEMA, and used it in the most effective way we could. I felt very proud of how that money helped some really devastated areas at that time. And I think that's the most connected I've felt to a project, because it was helping so many people.
I didn't prepare for this question, so I will say though, sometimes you just go to these meetings and you leave feeling like, wow, I'm really making a difference. And so, for example, I had my first meeting with the Northside Learning Center here in Syracuse the other day about trying to introduce people who utilize this resource to learn English, who typically live in, I shouldn't say typically, sometimes live in dilapidated housing with code violations, about this project that we launched right now to start to address some of these code and housing problems, safe and healthy housing issues. And to feel the sense of community come around something, it's just really powerful. And so I think every day, well, not every day, but oftentimes you just have these special things that keep you motivated rather than necessarily great big wins all the time.
Mine's just a quick story. The township is small, as I mentioned several times. We had an 11-acre privately owned swim club that was in need of a lot of upgrades. It was probably not managed the best, and so when I first got there, I really didn't know anyone or anything. I was still really just learning about the community. One of the board members asked, if the township would ever be interested in purchasing the swim club. And I said, of course. I didn't think at the time we would want to run it as a swim club, and that's still the case. But to be able to purchase an 11-acre piece of property in a tiny town is a big deal. And we just did it this year. So it took 8 years for us to sort of negotiate and wait out, in some cases, the board of this privately owned club. And it just so happens that it's right next to 11 acres that the township already owns. So now we're going to have a 22-acre park for our community. We have a couple of other small parks in the township, but we're going to put in a spray park. We're going to put in, playground. We're going to put in volleyball courts. We're going to put in a bunch of different things. And so having that vision and waiting it out and being able to close the deal finally this year has been, for me, probably one of the most, the biggest accomplishment in the town that I'm currently in, so.
I think mine is when I left the budget office to go to the Parks Department to be their administrative director, I was a lot younger than I am now, and it was a really big change, and a lot of the senior staff had previously taken an early retirement incentive, so they were about half the size of the senior staff that they were, just a year and a half prior, and the commissioner was relatively new, so it was a really tough kind of year and a half of transition, and throughout that time we kind of redid all the budget procedures, and kind of everyone was new, so it was kind of perfect storm moment, but it was really fun, and kind of looking back on it, it was a really pivotal time for the organization in terms of kind of redoing how we plan and how we did all those things. So that was a really cool experience. There's not really one moment in that, just kind of the general framework of kind of reorienting the planning process.
Okay. I know Ned and Wally, you guys had to leave early?
Early or soon.
Okay, that's fine then. All right, we can move on to the next question. Is there any professional organization do you recommend us, the students here, joining?
Yes. So it's LinkedIn, and this is something we talked about last night, Wally and I did, that, you have access to this Maxwell network. You have a website that literally tells you who else went to Maxwell. And even though it seems like it's just November and graduation's a long way off, it's a lot closer than you think. And you should really start to set some SMART goals, meaning specific, measurable, achievable, targeted, timely, all those things. And really start to kind of crank out a few kind of informational interviews every week or so. And there's no reason not to send off, 10 LinkedIn messages a week to alumni and say, hey, I think your job looks interesting. Do you have 15 minutes to half an hour to chat? And do a Skype call or do a phone call or do whatever. And you're going to learn so much. It's natural networking. And a lot of times what may happen is you'll find someone who is intrigued by your skills, gives you great advice, and then wants to bring you in as soon as you graduate. So it's something that you should absolutely be spending an hour a week doing.
ELGL has lots of good government postings, emerging local government leaders, thank you, and League of Women in Government is also a good one.
And ICMA, of course.
Okay. Moving on, what are some of the top priorities in your department while at work?
So, sorry, what was that?
Top priorities in your department?
So, in the budget office, our top priority is balancing the budget. That's an easy one. But more importantly, it's making sure that citizens are receiving what they need, the services they need, the buildings and financial help, any type of assistance they need, that the city is providing it in the best way possible and in the most fiscally responsible way possible, which isn't always necessarily the cheapest or the most expensive. It's usually somewhere in between. And our biggest priority is really being responsive to the responsive and responsible to the citizens that we're serving.
Anybody else?
I think that's perfectly said. I think it's local government's challenge is to do more, and then to do more with less, and then to do better. So we're always looking for ways to sort of hold the line. In New Jersey, we have a property tax crisis, basically. So that's our biggest challenge, is to figure out how to continue to do what we're doing with the money that we have, find new ways to maximize that money, to find new funding sources, grants, and things like that. But I think that's, serving the citizens obviously is our number one priority, and making sure that they have what they need. I loved the way you said that. And then, always striving to do better for your community.
All right. Jonathan, that was the last question I had. So now we open the floor for the audience in case you have any questions to ask. You got a question? No?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very interesting talks about your works, especially for me coming from outside of the United States. It's different to learn how this public service, civil servants work here. So my question is related to more international issues. So ICMA is International City and Managers Association. I was lucky to attend one of the conferences in Seattle. And as you may know, Maxwell very often hosts different visitors from different countries, like civil servants come, spend some time at the mid-career levels to learn. And one of the groups now being recently, I was helping from Kazakhstan. And my question is, first, do you have any experience, or has there been any experience you were part of that learning or hands-on training or practical kind of sessions, study visits from different countries to your offices or to your works? And secondly, is there any opportunity that if any newly coming groups can visit your offices and can somehow spend some time to learn how you execute or how you carry out your works, daily works? Because this is different, very new concept to the people coming from different countries, including my country, which is Uzbekistan. So nowadays I'm trying to discuss between the public servants' office in my country and Maxwell to bring some group here and to be as effective as possible. Thank you.
Well, ICMA works with the U.S. Agency for International Development in providing kind of those kind of opportunities. So please feel free to get in touch with me after this. I'll be happy to connect you with the folks, the staff at ICMA in Washington. So it's a great opportunity. And I have to apologize. I do need to go catch a plane. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's not too soon. If you're graduating in the summer of next year, to start looking for jobs and start thinking about jobs and start mentoring, finding mentors and connecting. So I would just encourage you all to do that. And my apologies for, I've got to pick my son up from daycare at 5 o'clock. And if I don't catch the 1:45 flight to Chicago, I will not do that. My wife will be very unhappy. So.
China 80s also.
I've got to head out too, so I'm going to.
Okay, can we give it like a big round of applause for thank you for coming.
Good to see you, Jake.
Did any of you want to answer the question he asked?
Some groups of international students have come to our office just for talks, and we have offered opportunities for shadowing as well. So you can reach out if you're interested.
Both the Senate and the Assembly, when I worked both of those places, we had a lot of programs where we went to other countries and met with government officials there to see what they were doing better that we could do better. And so I think state government too has a lot of ways, connections, I guess, with other national, organizations and other countries. So maybe going through the state is also a good way to get that information.
All right, any more questions? Here.
She's got a mic.
In your in your work, have you had opportunities to sort of work with other layers of government, and in terms of like maybe, for instance, Kelly, you work for a town, like have you had to request supplemental assistance from like the county or the state at various points, and like are there particular strategies that you've had to use for that, and how does that work?
So every state is going to be different, and actually every county in each state is going to be different, probably. So the first county that I worked in was super supportive and connected with their municipalities. The second county I worked in has Newark in it, and so it's very Newark-based. And the town that I worked for was an extremely wealthy town, so they really had no connection whatsoever with the county. And then the third community where I am now, I feel like we have the best county. They are extremely supportive. They offer shared services. There's a lot of connection between the municipalities and the county and the freeholders and the department heads at the county level and the county administrator. And at the state level, it's New Jersey. I don't really know what else to say. There's a lot of regulations, and so it's more of a contentious relationship between the individual municipalities and the state in terms of the types of restrictions that are put on us, and requirements that are put on us. But, over 17-year career, you develop relationships with different people, and those people move around, or, new people come in. So it's just sort of it's an ongoing process with the state, but it really depends on where you are.
When I worked for the state, I worked really closely with federal officials and as well as local officials, and I felt like that was the perfect place to be, kind of in between. But kind of what Kelly was saying, it's different everywhere you go, and now I'm working for a city that doesn't really get along with the county, which may change with this new administration, but it's a whole different world. You're kind of on an island, and I think it's harmful, and hopefully the new administration changes that, but it's always nice to be in an organization like with the state working with both local and federal. It's just everyone can help everyone else that way.
I think sometimes even if elected officials aren't getting along for whatever reason that may be, there's the opportunity to work with kind of the employees. And so, Alicia talked about our city-county dynamic that we currently have. And I think the people who are kind of at the same career level as I am, or, who are the civil servants, I think they are willing to work together. And so, for example, I've been working lately to update our city's emergency management procedures. Onondaga County has a great emergency management office, and they've been more than welcoming to have us there. They have seats around the table for city employees to be part of it. And so even if you're in a dynamic where you think, oh, this is going to be really hard, there are people who are willing and excited to work with you. And so it's just finding those people.
Any more questions?
I have one. So I've noticed that, first of all the gentlemen left, and there is only our 3 female. What is it like to be in government in a field that professionally there's a lot of different, traditionally it's a lot of men, so, and being a female in government, if you can speak to that perspective for us here.
Sure. Well, I recently had a baby, and I would just like to say that I had a lot of, I don't want to say issues, but I wanted to take a maternity leave. And I was really shocked because the men were incredibly supportive of my maternity leave, and the women were not at all. And I could not believe that this was like every day I would go and I was like, this is really happening. Like the women are giving me a hard time. So that was really shocking. And so I don't want to, hopefully my response won't be too jaded based upon this recent experience. But I think I've had a variety of experiences where some department heads that I have worked with have said things to me that I'm sure they would not ever have said if a man was in my role. And so to be completely honest, whenever that happens, I'm just a little bit astounded and like smile and laugh it off and like move on. And then afterwards, I always leave and I think, oh, I wish I would have said this, or I wish I would have handled it differently. And I think there's a generational change as well, where the folks who might be my parents' age or a little bit older react one way to seeing a woman in a position like this, whereas folks that I consider my peers or maybe even a little bit younger than me, they're completely open and willing to work with me and see me as an equal. So it is kind of this interesting dynamic on a variety of levels that I've experienced. But I wouldn't say that it would never affect my work or say, like, I don't want to work here anymore. I've never gotten to that point where I'm like, oh, there are crazy sexist people that are stopping me from succeeding. And that's not the case. Like, in general, it's a okay system.
Let the record show that I supported Adria's maternity leave.
She did.
I think as women, we're very apologetic a lot of times, and I think that was my biggest hurdle in government is you can't be apologetic. And I obviously there's a gender gap, and we're not going to solve it today. It's everyone knows it's there kind of thing. But as long as you, as a woman, know that you are worth just as much as the next guy, I mean, I think that's the important part, is you just have to keep reminding yourself there's no reason for me to not have done just as well as him or to, be treated in any different way. So, it's there. And as long as you acknowledge it is and you don't let it change you personally, then that's what's important.
So as the senior female on this panel, I have 3 kids. My oldest is almost 13. And so I had 3 babies while I've been doing all this. And it was challenging. It's doable, but the work-life balance, I had a long conversation with Kelly earlier today about the work-life balance. It is not easy. However, I was never a big fan of the women in government thing because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more it continues to be a thing. And I just feel passionately that I do a good job and I work really hard. And acknowledging that it is a thing and that, there is a pay gap in some cases and there's unfair treatment in some cases. Acknowledging that, being aware of that, and just like you said, not letting it affect you and letting you, making sure that you go and you do a good job is kind of my MO. And you definitely, in your career, come across people who say things and you go, I can't believe they just said that. My desk phone rings with residents calling me. which is, again, because I'm in a small place, I get an occasional hun, sweetie, that kind of thing. And I always, I laugh because, 9 times out of 10, or a kind of like compliment that was a little awkward, 9 times out of 10 people are well-intended. There are occasions when they're not well-intended, and that really stinks, and those are the types of things that we, as, a society have to work on. But that's, like you said, it's not going to get solved today. But so it's a challenge, but it's all moving in the right direction.
All right, any more questions? Anybody?
And if I could just follow up with that, how do you develop, as we transition from graduate school to professional career, how do you develop your professional persona and dealing with that transition?
That's a really good question. Your professional persona.
The transition from being a student to being
To a
a professional.
Can I speak really superficially right now? Pick your clothes appropriately. It seems silly, but actually, Kirsten Gillibrand always, she told this story that I thought was really interesting. When she first went to Washington, she went and bought all these beautiful suits, and but she picked them in kind of wild out there colors. So she got like a pink suit and a purple suit, and then she went to, and maybe this is getting back to a gender question as well, but so she went to, her first meetings and her first days, and all anybody talked about were her clothes. And so now she's like, I wear black, I wear blue, I wear gray, and I wear white. And I think it's okay to have some other colors as well.
I'm obviously not following that model.
But that's an easy way to kind of start to, at least, again, from a superficial, like outward level, to start to kind of get into the mindset. And I don't know, I'm also a person that, like, when I present myself differently physically, it's almost like I start to act a little bit differently as well. And that might just be me, but like, if I'm at home in sweats, I feel different and I act different than when I'm in a blazer. And so, but I hope we can come up with some better things than just like dress well people.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, I guess confidence was my biggest, important development as I moved into the professional world, because you can't go in thinking, I'm just a student, I don't know anything. No, you have your MPA from Maxwell, and that's the best school in the country, and so own it, walk in, just as much as the next guy. So I think confidence was really important in moving from being a student to being in the workplace.
I agree. I think dressing well is important. I do. The fellow that followed me in Melbourne, my old boss and I would laugh and try to bring him along, give him the Men's Warehouse catalog occasionally. It's so important, especially when you're in a management position, to look the part. And that is really superficial, because if you're smart and you do a good job, who really cares what you're wearing? But I think you do definitely start to, it affects how you act and how you speak. And so I do think that that's important. My old boss would wear cufflinks and the collar stays, and he was always in a suit. And when I worked there, I was always in a suit. When I transitioned to the community I'm in now, that is so far from where, things were in the office. So the environment and the community is just not, the feel isn't right. So it's what's the term? Business casual. And so you kind of have to also fit in with where you're, look around. When you talk to people and you go for the interview, look around and see sort of, what everyone else is wearing and, how everybody's acting with one another and things like that. I think that's important to kind of know.
I think another thing too is to get involved in, I don't want to say extracurriculars, but don't come in just for your 9 to 5. Like if there's a late community meeting, like don't be afraid to go to that and just kind of go out of your go out of your way to do a little bit extra, I think that will really help professionally as well. I know that in our office, we hired somebody who recently graduated, and so I had to think for a second, like, what did Samantha do that really, and when she came in, she was very quiet. She's still quiet, but like would just sit in meetings and take notes. She never really participated. And to kind of see her evolve and now speak her opinion and take initiative and reach out to people and set up meetings on her own and go out and meet people in the community, that's really what has set her apart, I think, comparatively to other employees, is she has the drive and she has become more vocal and confident, like Alicia said.
And that comes over time, and that's really all goes back to what I said much earlier about just being out of your comfort zone and being willing to make that first reach out, even if you're nervous or you're not necessarily the most outgoing person, just being willing to stay late and talk to people. Don't be afraid of people. Especially if you ask them about themselves. People love to talk about themselves, so that's always a good way to start, really.
All right, anybody else?
Thank you. I was just wondering, as you've been moving forward in your careers and maybe going into slightly different directions, what have you found really helpful in your personal, professional development other than mentors? And like, were there any other particular resources that you were like, oh, I don't really know much about X. How do you fill those gaps that you didn't necessarily get in your formal education?
Another plug for ICMA, sorry. Yeah. ICMA has such a huge network, and you could punch in anything in the search bar and come up with just a volume of information. And when you have time and when you are researching best practices and trying to find out what other places are doing in the same subject area, that's something that I do. I didn't mention this earlier when we were talking about associations, but being involved in your state association for managers or whatever your chosen local government career is, or your county or regional, sometimes there's regional things, being involved in those and actually like not just going to meetings, but actually volunteering and saying, oh yeah, I'll be on that committee. You're building your network, you're surrounded with people who are doing sort of similar things to what you're doing, and that helps with confidence and also gives you another way to kind of find out where your knowledge gap is, try to fill in. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, and kind of playing off of that, for instance, with now being in local government, one of the things I find the most useful is going to neighborhood association meetings. And like in Syracuse, we have tomorrow's Neighborhoods Today, TNT meetings. And I think it's really important to hear what people are saying there, what their issues are that they see, because I think that's when I learn, at work, you're kind of in your own little office and your own little world, and you think that these are the problems, but really when you go talk to people, they could be completely different. Like, I didn't realize that we should be putting more money in parks and that people don't care that much about X. So at a local government level, that was something. Just attending neighborhood meetings is a big deal.
I'm sure that's really important in yours, getting out in the field.
Yeah, talking to constituents and kind of almost doing human-centered design is really important. For me, the other professional things, so I hate networking, like schmoozing I think is the worst, but like you have to do that, I think, if you want to grow professionally. And so whether it's at a conference or locally, it's just something that you need to do, even if you're uncomfortable with it. Like I'm just not as good as some of my colleagues are at kind of this small talk. But also then identifying the gaps. And so for me personally, and figuring out then how to fill those. And so I wanted to learn more for data analysis. It was something that was important for our office. And so, but I was able to find locally that there's a resource called Code Like a Girl that you can go and you can take free classes for that. So trying to figure out how to fill those gaps once you've identified them.
I can keep asking questions if none of you have any. Okay, so we're going on to spring semester where there's a lot of workload, but also starting to think about jobs. Is there any strategies, any opportunities, outlooks that we should look into when we're doing these type of research?
I mean, so LinkedIn and contacting Maxwell alum is my number one answer, because when you're looking for jobs, yeah, Norma. That is how I got multiple jobs that I've had, is just by, well, that sounds interesting. Can you explain to me what you do? And, do you know of any, this is kind of what I'm interested in. Do you know of anything that fits that? And sometimes it's shocking what the jobs that people have. And I was in a lot of situations where I felt like I didn't even know you could have that as a job. And that sounds incredible. I would love to try that. So just reaching out to Maxwell alum is really helpful.
Yeah, I think the professional network is the most important thing. I know the majority of the positions I have had, I wouldn't say that like somebody got me the job, but I got an introduction, or they were at least said, you should look into this company, or you should meet so-and-so, who then, at least there was a connection there. So building that professional network is incredibly important.
The only thing I would add to that, because I agree with both of them, is just the location aspect of things. Some of you may have a very specific idea of where you want to be, like Wally said earlier, significant other, family, whatever the case may be. I know that when I was here, I did an interview with Deloitte or Anderson or something like that. I don't even remember who it was. Obviously, it didn't go anywhere because I knew I wanted to go back to New Jersey. That's where my family is. That's where my now husband is. And so I think focusing in on where you want to be. Now, if you don't care where you want to be, then the sky's the limit. And then I think you really hit the network, and you can just explore all sorts of things. But if you know where you want to be, then it does definitely help narrow the field of people that you should be talking to, and networks and professional associations and things like that you should be looking at.
Right. I guess that's all we have, right? Okay. That was wonderful. I, on the behalf of ICMA chapter here, would like to thank you for coming. It was great. And can we give them a big round of applause again?